I turned my boyfriend into a punchline for my new friends, and now my life is a joke. It's been 3 days, and the silence in our apartment is so loud it's starting to feel like a physical presence. Eric is gone, not just gone for a walk to cool off, gone. I mean, gone. His side of the closet is a hollow space of empty hangers. His ridiculously large collection of hiking mugs is missing from the kitchen cabinet. He packed his life up with a quiet, surgical precision that feels 1,000 times more brutal than if he had screamed and thrown things. He took everything that was his and left everything that was ours. The only thing he left behind is the basil plant he bought for our windowsill, the one he was so proud of. It's starting to wilt. I look at it and feel a pit in my stomach because I know it's my fault it's dying too. I've been staring at my phone for what feels like an eternity. His name is still there in my contacts, a ghost in the machine. Every single pathetic, rambling message I've sent since Friday night sits there with one single gray, damning checkmark. I know I messed up. God, do I know? But I don't understand how one stupid, catastrophic moment could just erase 2 years of us. I'm here because my friends either don't get it or are tired of hearing it. I need anyone, to just tell me straight, to look at the wreckage and tell me exactly how I managed to set my own life on fire. Please, just be brutal. I think I need it. His name is Eric. He's a geologist, which I used to think was just a fancy word for someone who really, really likes rocks. But to him, it was like reading a story written in stone. He'd pick up a piece of granite on one of our hikes, run his thumb over it, and tell me, see this line of quartz. That's a scar from when the continent tried to rip itself apart. He saw the world in layers, in history, in slow, immense pressures that create something solid and real. That's him. He's quiet, steady, and finds more joy in a day spent mapping fault lines than in any crowded bar. Our life together was like that simple, solid real. It was a peaceful kind of happiness built on lazy Sunday mornings with coffee, long hikes where he'd be completely in his element, and quiet evenings cooking together while listening to old records. He made me feel grounded. Then, about 6 months ago, I got a new job in marketing. It was a step up, a bigger firm, and it came with a whole new social landscape. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who were sharp, witty, and relentlessly cool. Their conversations moved at a speed I couldn't quite match, full of inside jokes and a casual, performative cynicism. At the center of this universe was Vanessa. She was magnetic, hilarious, and held court by telling stories that painted her husband as a lovable, bumbling idiot. One night, she did a 10-minute monologue about his failed attempt to build a spice rack, complete with sound effects. The table was in tears from laughing so hard. I laughed too, that hollow laugh you do when you feel like a complete outsider. And I learned a lesson that night. In this world, vulnerability was weakness, and the coolest thing you could do was show that you weren't too serious, too invested, especially in your relationship. Slowly, poisonously, I started to see my life with Eric through their eyes. Our quiet nights started to feel boring. His earnest passion for soil erosion felt quaint. The pressure to fit in was immense, and I started projecting my anxieties onto him, onto us. Eric noticed, of course. He's not a man who misses details. One evening, we were watching a movie where a character publicly humiliated her partner. He went quiet. Later, he told me about his father, how his mother's jokes in front of their friends were like tiny, constant cuts. She chipped away at him, Delilah, he'd said, his voice low and serious in the dark of our living room. He just got smaller over the years. I watched it happen. He turned to me then, his gaze so direct it felt like he was looking straight into my soul. I can handle anything but not that. I won't be a punchline for someone else's entertainment. It's my only real hard line. I remember nodding, promising him I understood, but a small, arrogant, ugly part of me thought he was being a little overly dramatic. A little too sensitive. That was my fatal mistake, thinking I knew better than the man who had just laid his deepest wound bare for me. Last Friday was supposed to be my coronation. My acceptance into the inner circle. I'd invited Vanessa and a few others from work over for dinner. I spent 2 days planning the menu, picking the right playlist, making sure everything was perfect. The wine was flowing, the food was a hit, and the conversation was loud and sparkling. I felt for the first time like I truly belonged. I was one of them. After dinner, we were all lounging in the living room, flushed with wine and self-satisfaction. Vanessa, of course, was holding court, telling a story about how her husband had tried to impress her parents by fixing their sink and ended up flooding their entire bathroom. It was brutal, but she told it with such comedic timing that everyone, including me, was gasping for air. Honestly, she concluded, wiping a tear from her eye, dating him is like having a golden retriever. He's loyal, he's sweet, but you just can't trust him around plumbing. The laughter died down and then all eyes turned to me. Your turn, Delilah, Vanessa said, her eyes glinting. Eric seems so put together. You must have some story about a chaotic ex to make us all feel better about our choices. And there it was, the moment. The stage was set, the spotlight was on me. My brain, swimming in a haze of Chardonnay and a desperate need for approval, saw its chance. A smart person would have laughed and changed the subject. A good person would have said, no, he's just great. I was neither. Oh God, where do I even start? I began, leaning forward conspiratorially. It's not an ex, but it's a story from my single days that still makes me cringe. I could feel Eric, who had been quietly listening from the armchair, tense up slightly. But I ignored it. This wasn't for him. This was for them. So I launched into this story from my junior year of college. It was about how I was casually seeing this artsy, intense guy while also being pursued by a sweet frat boy type. I painted a picture of myself as this desirable, slightly overwhelmed object of affection. I described with exaggerated detail how I accidentally told them both I'd be at the same coffee shop at the same time, just to see what would happen. It was like watching a nature documentary, I said, gesturing with my wine glass. Two completely different species competing for territory, it was awful. And hilarious. As I spoke, I kept darting my eyes over to Eric. I was looking for a reaction, a playful eye roll, a little smirk, a kick under the table that said, "You're terrible, but you're mine." I wanted him to be my co-conspirator, the silent partner in my performance. I wanted him to play the part of the slightly bemused, totally secure boyfriend. Vanessa and the others were eating it up. They were howling. "You're a menace, Delilah, I love it," Vanessa shrieked. Their laughter was like a drug, and I wanted more. So because my brain had apparently been replaced by cheap Merlot, I decided to embellish. The best part, I said, my voice rising to be heard over their giggles, was that the artsy one wrote me this god-awful, super dramatic poem about it and read it out loud at an open mic night. He actually used the word ethereal. That was the lie, it never happened, but it was the perfect punchline. The room erupted. And in that moment, basking in their approval, I felt like the cleverest, funniest woman in the world. I was a storyteller, I was one of the girls. I was a complete and utter fool, but Eric didn't play his part. As the wave of laughter crested, I looked over at him, ready to share a triumphant, knowing glance. But the face that looked back at me was one I didn't recognize. There was no amusement, no jealousy, no reaction at all, really, just a profound and terrifying stillness. His face had gone completely blank, as if all the color and emotion had been drained out of it. He was looking at me, but it felt like he was looking right through me, at the ugly, needy person I had just revealed myself to be. The silence that radiated from him was colder and more absolute than any anger he could have possibly expressed. His gaze was so intense it was like a physical force. The laughter from Vanessa and the others started to sound distant and tinny, like a radio playing in another room. My own smile faltered and died on my lips. Suddenly, the air in the room felt thick and heavy. I had been performing on a stage, and he had just turned off all the lights. I saw it then. I hadn't just told a story about some nameless exes from a decade ago. I had stood in the middle of our home, in front of strangers, and proudly broadcast a core truth about my character, that I was capable of using people's feelings as a spectator sport, that I found a certain kind of power in emotional manipulation. Vanessa, oblivious, nudged me. "God, tell us another one, you're so much more savage than you look." Before I could respond, Eric moved. He didn't storm out, he simply unfolded himself from the armchair with a slow, deliberate grace. He placed his glass on the coaster with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the suddenly quiet room. "Excuse me," he said, his voice perfectly even, almost polite. "I'm not feeling very well." And then he just walked away, down the hall to our bedroom, and shut the door behind him. The click of the latch was the final sound. He didn't slam it, he didn't have to. The quiet finality of it was so much worse. The party died a slow, awkward death after that. The energy had been sucked out of the room. Vanessa tried to revive it, making a joke about Eric being a sensitive soul, but no one really laughed. They left soon after, offering polite but distant goodbyes. The moment the front door closed, the apartment was plunged back into that crushing silence. I stood there for a minute, the debris of the dinner party scattered around me. A part of my brain, the stupid, arrogant part, was still trying to frame this as his problem. He's overreacting. It was just a joke, he needs to lighten up. I fortified myself with that anger, using it as a shield as I walked down the hall to our bedroom. I was ready for a fight, ready to defend my harmless fun, but there was no fight. When I opened the door, the scene that greeted me stopped me cold. He wasn't sulking in bed or pacing angrily. He was standing by the closet, a duffel bag open on the bed, and he was methodically placing folded shirts into it. The movements were calm, efficient, and utterly devastating. He wasn't packing for a night on a friend's couch to make a point, he was leaving. "What are you doing?" I asked, and my voice sounded small and childish. He didn't look at me at first. He just zipped up the bag and placed it on the floor. Then he turned, and the look on his face was one of pure, bottomless exhaustion. It was the face of a man who had already lost the argument, lost the relationship, lost everything, and was just going through the final motions. "I can't do this, Delilah," he said, his voice flat. I told you what my one line was." It was a story, Eric, a stupid story about people from 10 years ago. "It had nothing to do with you," I pleaded, the fake anger crumbling into real panic. "It had everything to do with me," he said, and for the first time, a flicker of something raw broke through his composure. "Because I was sitting right there, and you weren't telling that story to me. You were telling it at me, you were using me as a prop, you wanted to see me squirm for their entertainment." My feelings were the punchline. He shook his head, a slow, sad gesture. "I am not your audience, Delilah, and I'm not a clown you can trot out to get a laugh from your cool new friends." He picked up his bag. "Oh, we're done." He walked past me and I just stood there frozen. I couldn't process the speed of it. 2 hours ago we were fine, now my world was ending. He walked out of the bedroom and I heard the front door open. That was it. No screaming, no begging, just a quiet, clean amputation. The next 24 hours were a blur of denial and rising panic. I kept expecting a text. An angry, multi-paragraph rant would have been a relief. Anything to show he was still engaged, still angry, still there, but there was nothing. Just the deafening silence from his end. By Saturday afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I tried calling. It rang twice and then went to voicemail. I called again, straight to voicemail. My stomach dropped. He'd blocked me. I tried WhatsApp. The messages just sat there undelivered. Facebook Messenger, Instagram DMs, every digital door I had to him had been slammed shut and bolted. In a full-blown panic, I started messaging our mutual friends, trying to sound casual. "Hey, have you heard from Eric? He left his phone charger here, haha." The responses were polite and evasive. They'd seen him, but no, they didn't know where he was staying. They were sorry to hear we were having a rough patch. The subtext was crystal clear: we are not getting involved in this. They were distancing themselves, carefully extracting themselves from my drama. Finally, desperate and crying, I called Vanessa. I thought if anyone would understand the joke, it would be her. I poured out the whole story, how Eric had just packed a bag and left, how he'd blocked me everywhere, how it was all a huge misunderstanding. I waited for her to offer the outrage and solidarity I so desperately craved. Instead, there was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then she said with a distinct lack of warmth, "Well, that sucks. Men are so dramatic, aren't they?" She wasn't comforting me, she was dismissing me. "Look, Delilah, he'll probably cool off. If not, whatever, you can find a guy with a better sense of humor." And that was it. That was the moment the floor fell out from under me. I had performed for her. I had sacrificed the one good, real thing in my life on the altar of her approval. And my prize? A shrug and a platitude. I wasn't her friend. I was just a temporary source of amusement, a jester for her court. The show was over and she was already bored. I hung up the phone and realized with a sickening certainty that I was completely, utterly alone. I'm now living in the hell I built for myself. My only connection to him is a ghost account on Instagram, a Finsta I made years ago to follow craft blogs that he doesn't know about. It's the one digital window he forgot to nail shut. And so I watch, I scroll, I refresh, refresh, refresh. His life is just continuing. There are no dramatic, heartbroken posts. No cryptic quotes. He posted a picture yesterday from a geological survey site. He was smiling, squinting into the sun, a mountain range sprawling behind him. He looked free. He posted a story this morning of a coffee cup on his sister's kitchen table. He's with his family, he's safe, he's moved on, and I'm here in the dark. The faint blue light of my phone illuminating my tear-streaked face. Each normal, happy picture he posts is another twist of the knife. I see his friends commenting, his sister making a joke. His world is still turning, full of people who love him. My world has shrunk to the size of this screen. The stage I so desperately wanted to perform on is empty. The audience has gone home. The only person left is the clown, sitting alone in the wreckage, endlessly replaying the moment she chose the cheap laugh over the love of her life.